I was a bodybuilder for 4 years and it fucked up my health, and this is my story. Hi, my name is Clara. I'm a chartered psychologist, a Healthcare Professions Council registered sport and exercise psychologist, and a fitness coach. And yes, I used to compete in bodybuilding for 4 years. The last time I competed was in December 2021, and I started training more like a hybrid athlete in around about September 2023. And this is part one of how I made that transition, why I made that transition, and where I'm at right now. And I've been thinking a lot about like how to kind of like frame the story, like what is the part of it that I want to highlight. Do I want to highlight that I had hypothalamic amenorrhea for a year plus and that I recovered from it and tell you about how I recovered from it? Do I want to highlight the fact that for as long as I can remember, my weight was always like up and down because I kept trying to lose weight and gaining weight all the time, and actually for the last 2 and a bit years I've been able to maintain my weight without really having to think about it much? Do I want to highlight the fact that bodybuilding was something that was really helpful for me and then it became really unhelpful, and talk you through and demystify some of the myths around bodybuilding? I'm not sure what part of this I want to highlight, but all those things seem to be really important to me. So while I started this video by saying that bodybuilding ruined my health, I actually want to go a bit deeper into that and give you a bit more context into how I got into bodybuilding, what my bodybuilding journey was actually like, and also why I decided to stop bodybuilding. So maybe let's just start from the beginning. In the beginning, I'm kidding. No, I got into bodybuilding completely by accident, to be honest. I basically finished uni in 2017 and I was stuck in a really dark hole of binging and restricting. At the point of finishing uni, like I had been dieting for my graduation for I don't even know how long. Like it was atrocious. I managed to lose weight, but I was stuck in this like binge restrict pattern and I just simply could not get out of it. And after that, I moved in with my boyfriend at the time, my now husband, and I started working a job that was a nightmare. It was a complete and utter hellhole. It was awful. It was really bad. Let me know in the comments if you want me to tell you about that story in a completely different video. But I essentially got into this job and it was horrific. And what that meant really was that I felt shit all the time. I'd come out of uni, I'd graduated, I'd lost all this weight, I'd been in this binge restrict pattern, but then I also didn't have a goal anymore to train for. I didn't have to be skinny for my graduation. So that meant that the binging persisted. And while at the time I'd been trying to compensate and manage to compensate for the binging with exercise, because this job was draining me so much, I was taking my like workout gear with me to work every single day, and I was walking past the gym, completely ignoring it. And then I would literally walk miles and miles to like, you know, the, I guess like a close enough bus stop to then like get the bus and get home. But in that whole walk that I would take to get the bus to go to my flat at the time, I would stop by every single tiny little supermarket and shop that was on that lane or in that straight to buy like 5-6 pounds worth of binge food. And I would binge it on the way home. I'd get rid of all the rubbish and I'd get home, and then I would basically like keep binging or whatever, or I'd like, you know, obviously nobody would really know that I'd been binging. And so yeah, it was bad. It was not a good time. And eventually I did change jobs. I started working as an admin at a private mental health practice, and through that, because the private practice had just kind of started and opened up, I was able to be exposed to like, I guess, actual clinical psychology for the first time in my life, because your undergrad degree doesn't really cover much of that. And through that, I had a lot of time to research and read and see what the clinicians that I was supporting as an administrator were doing with clients that they were seeing who were struggling with disordered eating or with eating disorders. And so I started to apply a lot of those things to myself. And as the year 2017, oh my God, was coming to an end, I decided, okay, I am going to get my shit together, basically, not from a very helpful place. So I'm going to get my shit together, and I want to really commit to my health and fitness. At this point, I'd really been working hard to stop binging. I was slowly getting to myself into like a better headspace around it, and it coincided with me getting an acceptance into Loughborough University to do my master's the following year in the autumn. So I thought, okay, I've got about just under a year to get into the best shape of my life, and also to sort my shit out for going back to university, because my perfectionism was one of the main triggers for me being so all or nothing, and for me kind of binging and taking that pressure out of my body essentially. And so I started working with a coach in January 2018, but we started working together, and essentially I said, okay, I want to do like a photo shoot. And so, you know, I started training for this photo shoot and it was great, loved it. And then Vaughan asked me once, you know, have you thought about competing? And I thought, competing in what? I knew nothing about bodybuilding. And essentially like that opened me to the world of bodybuilding. And if you don't know this about me, like I've always danced. I was never into training, I was never into exercise, never into sport, but I've danced my whole life. And so for me, bodybuilding, like, and the idea of bodybuilding, specifically the bikini category, because that was like what matched my size and my shape at the time and still does. Sadly not figure, sad times, but the bikini category to me was just like this beautiful expression of like the creative artistry of like almost like kind of dance like, and I was just like, this looks really cool. So I kind of signed up for a show randomly like 3 weeks after my photo shoot, stepped on stage, didn't have a fucking clue about what I was doing, but I loved it. And I was hooked after that, straight away hooked. So I competed a few weeks later. I moved to Loughborough, went to uni, did my master's, started my second bodybuilding prep in the summer term of my master's, so literally while I was doing my dissertation. Excellent, terrible idea. I also started to drive at the same time, so anyone who's known me for a while will know how fucking awful that was. Anyway, story for another day. Started doing my second prep, doing my dissertation, competed that year again, was a lot more successful because I had a lot more practice. And this is now the year 2019. I graduated from my master's and I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do with myself? I had a PT qualification. I'd worked in the fitness industry previously, basically doing like exercise to music and Zumba classes, of course, like tapping into my dance background. And that is when my coach, so Vaughan, asked me if I wanted to join him and basically be an online coach under his brand. And of course, I jumped at the opportunity coming out of uni, you know, freshly graduated from my master's. I was like, well, yeah, that sounds like a good way to start, I guess, working. At the same time, I got a full-time job in my local council working on an exercise referral pathway. And basically kickstarted that in January 2020. At the time, I was also planning on enrolling to start my training as a sport and exercise psychologist, so my stage 2 training. And I was due to be doing that in March 2020. And of course, then the world shut down. So I signed my contract for my new job in the January. Started then. I started officially working as an online fitness coach with Vaughan in the February. I sent off my paperwork to start training as a sport and exercise psychologist in March, and then the world shut down. And it was in hindsight, one of the best things that could have happened, but at the time, one of the worst things that ever happened. I did not enjoy COVID at all. It was awful. Not a good time at all. But all that was happening, and I was really struggling. At the time, I had this ongoing fear of gaining weight. Not having access to a gym sent my head spiraling. I was not in a good place. Eventually, I was able to find a way to train, but it was not good. Like granted, was in a much better place in terms of like body self-acceptance than I'd been previously in my life, but bodybuilding and I guess like in a way like the gaining weight, the off-season side of bodybuilding was really helpful for me because it almost like it allowed me to eat more. It allowed me to justify gaining weight for the first time in my life, which I'd never done before. But it was very conditional. So I was only allowing myself to gain weight because I knew that I would be losing it again, right? I knew that I had control over being able to lose that weight, and eventually I would prep again and I would lose all the weight, etc. So competing in 2019, obviously I was never planning on competing in 2020 and it was going to be impossible anyway, but I had my eyes set on 2021. Now, all throughout this time, I have been on the pill since like 2014, which is when I met my boyfriend, my now husband. And so all throughout this time where I've been like massively dieting, like losing, about 15% of my body weight and gaining it back and all that type of stuff, I've been on the pill. So I've not really been paying attention to my body at all, right? The pill was fantastic for me as a student. Throughout all those years, it meant that I could just like carry on with my studies without having to get worried or be worried about, being pregnant. And so when it came to my final prep in 2021, I'd officially started training as a sport and exercise psychologist already at this time. So I was starting to apply some of the principles of compassion, self-acceptance to myself, of course, because you always do that. And I started that prep having found out the previous year in 2020 that my mum had terminal cancer. So throughout that prep, there was a lot riding on that prep for me. I had a feeling that it was going to be my last prep for a while. Like in my head, I was thinking maybe I'll take a really long off season. I was getting married the following year. I was like, I'm going to take a really long off season, maybe compete again in 2025, which never, of course, happened. But yeah, like there was a lot riding on this prep. For me, it was like something that really sort of cemented my career in many ways, like established me more like in the fitness industry. At the time, like I said, I was training as a psychologist, so I was really able to reflect on the contingencies between like bodybuilding and psychology, and sort of bring the two together and apply that to myself. And I was competing, and I finished competing in December 2021. And my mum was able to come to my last show. And so it was really important. I used to make vlogs at the time, and if anybody watches those or ever watched those, there's a vlog where I'm talking about like some of the COVID restrictions coming back into place and how some of the COVID restrictions were starting to impact borders and stuff like that. And I was so scared of not being able to go and compete in France, and like not being able to have my mum be there for my last bodybuilding show, as it turned out to be. And so anyway, that particular prep was the hardest one I ever did. I dieted for 24 weeks. I lost a very high percentage of my body weight. I was unbelievably lean. I was the leanest I've ever been in my life, which was possible because I had more muscle than the last time that I had competed and like obviously dieted. And towards the back end of prep, like maybe from about like November onwards, I started to notice quite a few different signs and signals in my body. So my hair started to fall out. This has happened previously to me, but I hadn't linked it to prep. I had linked it happened to me when I was in Loughborough, but I thought that it was because of the stress of moving. The first time that I had an issue with like hair loss was when I first moved to Scotland, which in hindsight I'm going, that's also when I started to try to lose weight again. So was it the stress of moving? Was it the weight loss? Was it the two combined? I don't know. But in that November anyway, November 2021, I started to notice significant hair loss. I was constantly, and I mean constantly freezing, could not get warm. It was awful. It was awful. I had really bad, what I call like phantom pees. So not incontinence, but like close enough where you feel like you're about to burst and you literally like can't hold it in, like atrocious, associated to low estrogen levels. Who knew? My nails kept breaking all the time. I started to experience hot flashes at night, and I started to get pretty fucking worried. And again, in tandem with this, remember, I am training as a psychologist, as an exercise psychologist, and I was working at the time with a client who had been discharged from clinical psychology for anorexia, but they were working with me to transition them into exercising and eating from a place of much more compassion. And one of the factors that we had, I guess, noticed in her presentation was that she didn't have a menstrual cycle, which as a professional, right, professional hat, completely apart from my personal hat at the time anyway, as a professional kind of prompted me to look into hypothalamic and amenorrhea. And I read the big chunky book by, oh my gosh, what's her name? That's awful, what's her name? Nicola something. The author of No Period, Now What? And as I was reading that book, I was like, oh my God, I relate to the psychological symptomatology for hypothalamic amenorrhea, and I also relate to the physical symptoms of HA, you know, the loss secondary hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is when you have a period and then you lose your period. Of course, I hadn't physically experienced the loss of a period because I was on the pill. So I was having, I guess, like a fake bleed, a withdrawal bleed every single month. And I basically just became really suspicious of it. I was like, I can't really unsee this. And so when it came to finishing prep and, you know, gradually recovering, which was a struggle in and of itself, the January, so like a month after finishing prep, I decided to come off the pill. And that is when I very quickly realized that I did not have a menstrual cycle. That's it for part one though. And in part two, I'll tell you about how I found out that I didn't have a menstrual cycle and what I did to recover it. But you'll need to wait a week to see that. So make sure to subscribe to my channel and like the video so that I know that you'll be watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.